Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ dhammāṃ saṅghāṃ namasami. So, August 26th, 2020, Abhayagiri Monastery, Redwood Valley, California. It was either yesterday or the day before. After the meal, I was just kind of seeing everybody quietly going about their duties, bhikkhus, samaneras, anagarikas, picking up bowls, going into the bowl washing area, quietly washing the bowls, putting everything away, and it was neat and it just felt very peaceful, and people are doing the practice, and I felt this wholesome sense of kind of like pride coming up. Not pride in terms of being better than anybody else, but pride in terms of we're actually doing it, we're actually doing the practice, we're actually living according to Dhamma, living according to Vinaya. And there's just this sense of both wholesome pride, but also inspiration, like a kind of expansive awareness that rose up just watching the community going about the daily routine. But it can be quite powerful, these moments where we realize that we're doing something that's out of the ordinary, and we're actually committing to a practice which is precepts and principles that we live by, which are difficult to do, difficult to commit to, and much of the time it's a struggle to stay within the standards of training that we have here in the monastery. And yet there's this group of people who are doing it, sticking with it. And if the newer members of the community, anagarikas, samaneras, learning the ropes and actually doing it, actually learning it, actually going for it, and there's always difficulties, there's always blind spots and things we miss, but that's to be expected, that's totally okay, and that's part of the training, part of the process. So this wonderful thing we call learning that takes place, and the Buddha classed anybody who's on the path as a learner. So it's a path of learning, a path of study, path of practice. And then when the path is complete, at the attainment of arahantship, the final goal of Buddhist practice, that's called the no more learner, nothing more to learn. So the learners, those on the path, and I just like to think about it that way, like a sense of learning. Can be a sense of frustration too. Frustration's a big part of learning. It's kind of like, from time to time I like to use the analogy of sharpening. So for a while I got offered a straight razor, got into sharpening straight razors and trying to use a straight razor for shaving, was doing that for a few years until I had more duties and didn't quite have enough time to keep the straight razor sharp and shave with a straight razor, but still got interested in learning sharpening, learning the principles of sharpening, and reading up, studying up on sharpening, how to look after a blade, how to keep it sharp. And straight razor sharpening opened up the whole world of sharpening in general to me, because there's a principle that you follow with all types of sharpening. And that principle is get it as sharp as possible. And the sharper the better. And sharper the safer most of the time too, because if you get cut by something that's dull, it's far worse than getting cut by something that's sharp. And I remember shaving with the straight razor, and it was so sharp that I cut myself one time and I didn't feel anything. I actually didn't know I had cut myself until I saw the blood kind of dripping down, and then I knew. So I thought, okay, that's pretty sharp. So when you look, but this sharpening thing is a good illustration for learning, because learning there's a sense of frustration. So I was learning sharpening using these different sharpening stones, and it's like, okay, I did exactly what they said. I did exactly what the tutorial video said, and it's still not sharp. What's going on? So try it again, get a feel for it. There's a sense of frustration. So when that frustration occurs, then there might be a inclination to give up. So when there's frustration, there might be the inclination to give up or to run away, to stop doing it, move on to something else. Okay, this is frustrating, it's not sharp, I did what it said, and it's not working. But then going back to it, okay, let's try again. And sharpening. So there was also impatience, not only frustration, but impatience. So I want it to be extremely sharp. So, okay, but I'm impatient. I don't want to start at the beginning. I want to start with the finest sharpening stone. So let's just go to that and make it as sharp as possible. And okay, it's not working. It's not sharp. Okay, got to go back to the beginning. Use the coarser stones first. Use the coarser stone, check the edge, go up, move up a stone, check the edge again, and you do when you move up to a less coarse stone, a finer stone, then you look at the edge and you see, okay, have the scratches from the previous one fully disappeared on that edge. And okay, you do that, and okay, you still see some scratches there, still got to work away with it. Move up to a finer stone, and then at a certain point you can't see any scratches, but it just gets more luminous, and the edge gets more shiny and luminous. Then you test it, you test the razor, you go across your fingernail and see, like, okay, it might look good, but you go across the fingernail and you see, oh, maybe it'll like stick a little bit somewhere, so that it shows that maybe one little part of the edge kind of didn't get fully sharpened. So take it back to the stone, sharpen it. Go to the finer stone, and as you go to the finer stones, you need to do it longer to really get that edge on there. And then once you get to the really fine stones, there's a phenomenon which can happen, which is called over-honing, where you overdo it, you over-sharpen it. And so with a straight razor, when you under-hone it, when it's not sharp enough, it'll shave, but it'll like scrape you really bad and be very uncomfortable. When it's over-honed, it will not cut any hairs at all. So like when it's over-honed, you try to shave with it, it won't cut any hairs at all. It'll glide over really comfortably, but it won't cut anything. And so what happens with over-hone is that infinitesimally small edge gets kind of bent over in different directions. And so then you can do different techniques to undo that over-hone, because you've gotten it super sharp, but then it's so sharp that the edge is so small that it's bent over. And when it bends over, then it doesn't do anything for you. So you can't just keep sharpening it to undo that. What you got to do then is to use a stone that has a slurry on it. So you use like a stone on another stone, and you make like this like slurry, and then you slowly go through it a few times and keep testing it, and you keep sharpening on that. And this slurry, the little particles in this slurry sort of like work away at that over-hone, and then you do like the hair test. So you might take that razor and like shave some hair off of your arm. And it might shave fine once it's on the skin, but the test you want to do is you want to float over the skin and not touch the skin, and it should cut your hairs while floating. So while floating in the air, the hairs should still cut, even though you're not on the skin there. So that's the test that you do, and then as you're floating over the skin and not touching the skin, it might like pull on your hairs a little bit, and they'll still cut, but it's kind of pulling on them a little bit. So that's called. So yes, it is cutting them, but that's called loud poppers. So that's like the least sharp you want it, and then you okay, well, I'm going to work away on that slurry stone a bit more, maybe a few more strokes. Try it again, and then you might find that it cuts the hairs while floating in the air, but then it doesn't pull them as much, but they still kind of pop a little bit, and that's called quiet poppers. And then you think, okay, well, I want it to be as sharp as like a samurai sword. So then you keep working away a little bit at it, and you might achieve the highest level, which is where you float and the hairs just sort of fall in half, and that's called the silent slicer. And that's like the sharpest you can possibly get it. You could probably get it sharper actually if you're some sort of master sharpener, but for our purposes, for shaving your head with a straight razor, if you want it to be extremely comfortable, not get cut at all, and have a very good experience, then that's good enough. You don't need to go further than that. But then what this illustrates is the kind of frustration and the time and the impatience that is necessary for learning something, for learning a skill. So it's exactly the same with meditation or with the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path that we're doing. So you start out on the path, maybe read a Dhamma book, read some Ajahn Chah, get inspired, feel like, yeah, this is it, this is for me. Want to undertake the practice, meditation practice, want to maybe undertake the monastic training and go for it and walk the path, and might be very determined, have a lot of inspiration. And then we meditate with a lot of sincerity, and we might have a good experience, but then as time goes on, then it might be like we might have some difficult experiences, and that frustration, that sense of like, why isn't it working? You know, I'm doing the technique, I'm doing the practice, I'm doing what the Buddha said to do, and it's not working. So at a time like that, that's when we start to develop perseverance. That's when we start to develop a sense of really learning. When we work through that frustration, we work through that difficulty, that sense of struggling with it, and we start to investigate closer, like, okay, well, there's something going on here that I'm not seeing yet. There's something going on here that I'm not noticing. So I think of like the coarse sharpening stone, that's like the sila, that's the precepts. So at first we might want to, like when I first started doing straight razor sharpening, it was like, I want the finest stone right off the bat. I want the 10,000 grit stone. I want the 8,000 and 10,000 grit stones right off the bat. So that's like, I want the meditation, I want the jhana, I want the samadhi. But then, okay, it's not working. So let's go back. Let's go back to that coarse stone. Let's look at the precepts. How are the precepts? How's the training? How's the purity of body and speech? So how's that going? How is our relationships with other people going? What are our conversations with others like? Are we harmonious or disharmonious? And how do we use our speech? Are we straightforward, upright in our speech? Do we joke around a lot? Do we use sarcasm a lot? Or are we quiet? Are we very tense when we speak? Or how's our bodily action? How are we using our body? And how are we using our our eyes, our ears, what are we paying attention to? So that's like the course stone. So that's like, okay, that's the foundation. That's the foundation for the meditation. So we work at that for a while, and that's also like a sense of developing mindfulness. So we're developing mindfulness with our body and speech, and so we're learning about ourselves and learning why do we act in certain ways, why do we speak in certain ways, and it's not a judgment or a condemnation of ourselves or of anybody else, but it's just starting to learn, starting to see like, okay, that's why the refinement didn't work right off the bat, because let's just learn how to live normally first. Let's learn how to live normally and harmoniously. Once we learn how to live normally and harmoniously, maybe then we can talk about samadhi. Maybe then we can talk about meditation. So we start by learning how to live in a very normal, very harmonious way, and we learn how to be open. We learn how to be open, how to be flexible. So then we can move up. We can start with some of those refinements. So then there's the refinement, that would be like samadhi, getting to the refined sharpening stones, and the takes a longer time. It takes a longer time on those refined stones. And then sometimes see like, well, it's still, why isn't it cutting? Why isn't it working? Why isn't it cutting the defilements away? Why do I still have greed? Why do I still have anger? Been practicing meditation for years. That can't be anger. I'm not an angry person. So there might be a sense that frustration arises again, that learning needs to take place, like what's going on. So that's like the overhone with the razor, like we've been honing it, we've been diligently working at the meditation, we've been refining the mind, but at the same time, like there's something missing. It's still not working. So then I think of like that special stone you can use at the end with the slurry on it to slowly and carefully undo that overhone. I think of that as like panya. That's the wisdom aspect, where we're really starting to see like, okay, there's a reason it's not cutting. There's a reason that the meditation isn't cutting away at the defilements. So we can either be okay with that. We can either say like, okay, we can rest on our laurels and be happy with that where we're at, or we can say let's sharpen it further. Let's go further. And so we can work away with this slurry stone and work away at that overhone, and we can start to say like, okay, now it's going to start to cut. Now it's really sharp, and now the wisdom sword is really, really sharp, and can start to cut away at not just say greed or anger, which is what we would think of like coarser defilements, like actions by body and speech, which might be indicative of strong greed or anger. And these things are, again, none of this is a judgment, because all these things are natural. All people have these things. And so, but then the more refined stuff that's harder to see, like the sense of identification, the sense of self, that's going to be harder to see. Learning how to call that into question, or in a sense do surgery on that, or start to deconstruct that. And all of this learning that takes place, it can be frustrating, it can be a struggle, but when we work through it, we can have a good result, something sharp, something beautiful at the end. And Longpo Mun would use more of a strong analogy to illustrate this sense of learning. He would say when you first come to the training, you're like a unforged bar of iron, and then when you come into the monastery, come into the training, try to take on the precepts, the celibacy, and trying to do this sense of purity of body, speech, and mind, and then it's like that bar is being shoved into hot coals, so it's being made red and hot, and then when that bar is red and hot, and then the teacher comes and tries to give you instruction, and it's like beating it with a hammer. So when you're red and you've been shoved into the coals and red and hot, and then once it's red and hot, then beating it with a hammer, beating it into shape. So that's like receiving the feedback or the instruction that we might not want to hear. And it's said that a great teacher is a teacher who exposes your hidden faults. So that's like, something about, even though we might be sincere in coming to the training, nobody wants their hidden faults exposed. It's a very rare person who wants their hidden faults exposed, but then remembering that that's the whole reason we're here. And so when the hidden faults get exposed, that's like the red hot iron getting beaten into shape, and then once it's beaten into shape, then it can cool down and be sharpened and become something useful. So then that's when they say in Thai that chai dai, then you're useful. Then we can make use of that well-honed knife or axe or whatever it is. So it's a strong analogy, but at the same time, it really, when we're in it, then it really can be like that. But it's definitely worth it. It's definitely worth it to be a well-honed axe, a well-honed sword. Just before the puja, I was talking with our project manager. We've got a project in the monastery that's getting ready to happen tomorrow. They're going to break ground on it. It's the building of a 4-room dormitory, and it's near the log cabin, and also doing the foundation for this log cabin replacement. And we have this log cabin was a kuti that was built in 1996 by David Dawson, who was a regular feature here in the first days of Abhayagiri. And it's quite an interesting kuti. It's over time, it's different great monks have visited there. Longpo Liam stayed in there. Longpo Samedo has stayed in there. Tana Jantan stayed there for one night when he came when I was in Anagarika. And others, I think Ajahn Amaro might have lived there for a little while, actually. And so there's this history, and we're gonna demolish it, actually. So we were talking this afternoon. A few of us were up there, and it's like, what should we? We should make it a museum. We should make it like a Kruba Ajahn museum, or like move it down here somewhere, or like I had the idea maybe we could move it up to the Chedi site or something, and have like a Longpo Cha shrine or a Longpo Liam shrine in it or something. And but I think that cabin is so old that and the whole idea, we didn't even know about like the county and codes when it was first built. I think it was costed $400 or $700 or something. Is that how much it was? $600. $600, yeah. So now it's $70,000 to build a kuti, and yeah, it's logs, and it's actually held together by this foam, this like spray foam stuff. I think when we take the roof off, the logs are just going to fall down. They're just going to fall on the ground. It's just, but the whole idea was the county did, they sort of grandfathered it in the year 2000, but with the idea that we would replace it eventually. So now we're finally getting around to that after 24 years. But a lot of kind of nostalgia looking at this log cabin and remembering how we locked Longpor Liam inside of it because the lock was on the outside, not on the inside, and that he didn't show up for the meal, and nobody knew why he wasn't showing up for the meal. Went up, and then the the upatak, the attendant, was aghast to find he had locked Longpor Liam in the kuti, and so unlocked it and was very apologetic, and then Longpor Liam never really said it. He was just in there meditating. He was just sitting in there and very peaceful and equanimous about it, and didn't make a fuss, didn't say anything. And then somebody asked him later, "Why didn't you say anything about that?" And he said, well, I could see that once I tried the door, I could see what was happening and thought this is a good opportunity for practice. And so just decided to sit and enjoy being in the forest. And once I saw that people felt remorseful for what they had done, and they decided they weren't, that it wasn't intentional, and he thought, well, the situation's already resolved, so I don't really need to say anything. So and then later when Longpor Sumedho got locked in there, some people might remember he had a bit of a different reaction to being locked in there, which is kicked the door down. So I think that was when they decided to reverse the door and actually have the lock on the inside. So it's got some good history there, and but I was talking to Wayne, because now we're finally starting this project. We had the idea it was going to maybe start in April or May, and of course global circumstances happened and things got delayed in the county, and now finally it is starting. And Wayne said he was very happy that it's starting. He's very excited to do this project, and he's always wanted to build something for us. He's been our project manager for a long time, but he said he's always wanted to be on the ground and build something for us. So this is a good opportunity for him, and he wants to do a good job. And then he was sort of reminiscing about the whole history of Abhayagiri, and he said, yeah, Ajahn Amro's gone, and he's but Ajahn Pasano's still there. And I said, yeah, Ajahn Pasano's looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. And he said, yes! So he's looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. And it was the most expressive ever, actually. And then he gave me encouragement, and he said he feels really wonderful whenever he comes up here, and that after all the people he's worked with, he just feels he's so happy to be working for us, and it's just quite nice, quite lovely, expressions of gratitude, and then he gave me some encouragement personally, and he said, okay, you're doing good, just keep going. So he sort of notices what's happening, and he said it's just expressing his gratitude for this place and for being involved for so many years. So that was nice. That's something we have to learn as well, how to recognize goodness. How to recognize goodness. So sometimes we do have to raise up our heads, look around, and recognize, oh wow, this is what's happening. This is what's happening around us. This is good. It's like the Buddha when he saw the heavenly messengers, and like when he was the prince before he was the Buddha. So when he was a prince, he would go and hang out in these pleasure parks from time to time. And even though he led a very sheltered life, and his parents wanted to shelter him from any type of suffering or anything unpleasant, but there was like the first time when he went out and he saw like an old person. And so he had been sheltered from these different things: old age, sickness, death, any types of unpleasantness, any type of suffering, had been sheltered from these things. So upon seeing an old person, he was kind of like asking Chana, his charioteer, like, what's wrong with him? And he said, oh, he's old. Everybody gets old. It's totally normal. And he's thinking like, oh, that's too bad. And thinking like, oh, I'm gonna get old. And they go again, and this as the legend goes, they go in another time, and he sees a sick person, and he thinks like, what's wrong with him? And Chana tells him, well, that's a sick person, so that's normal. I mean, many people get sick, many people have to deal with that, and some people get sick and they get better. Some people get sick, they don't get better. So he thinks, oh, that's too bad. That's quite troublesome. And they go out a third time at a different point, and they drive by a dead person. So in India, death is right in your face usually. It's not unusual to see a dead person. And so he says, well, what's wrong with him? He says, well, he's dead. Everybody has to die. That's normal. And he kind of had known about death as a concept before, but not really seen it or reflected on it as terms like, oh, I have to die too. I too am of that fate. And so the prince, the bodhisattva, he's quite pensive at this point, quite troubled by these things and wondering what to do. And of course, as it goes on, they go out again, and he sees the monk, the samana, sitting at the foot of a tree practicing meditation. And he recognizes that, and he says, this is good. This is the response, and this is what I have to do. And so when he sees that, then he decides, he makes that decision that he's going to leave. And now then you come to one of the more controversial points of the Buddha's life story, where he leaves on the night after his son is born. So according to what I've learned about the Buddha's life story in Thailand, the Buddha Brawat in Thai is that at that time in India, when a son was born to a prince, he was made the king. He was made the king the next day, because then he has an heir. And then the king, my understanding is, he would be like a guiding elder type. And so the prince, when he has a son, he thinks, if I'm gonna leave home, it's now or never. It's either this night or I'm gonna become a king and I'm gonna be stuck here. And so it's a very difficult decision he has to make, but then he ends up leaving. He ends up leaving that night and to pursue the monk's life. And so then, because he did that, we have everything from 2,600 years ago to now, with everything Buddhism. We have all of that based on that decision, based on seeing the samana, thinking this is good. So I like that sense of like seeing the monk, seeing the samana. That's what's called the fourth heavenly messenger. So the first three are aging, sickness, and death. Those are the heavenly messengers, the heavenly reminders, the wholesome reminders, the reality reminders, bringing us back. And then the response is the search, the seeking, the spiritual search, whatever form that takes for each and every person. So then the prince thinking, this is good, this is the response, and this is what I have to do. So leave that for reflection this evening.